Hey, we're at the Hasbro booth at San Diego Comic-Con 2019. I'm with Drew Nolosco. We're talking a Transformers trading card game. It's coming up on about a year since its first release.
Exactly.
I remember we talked about the game last San Diego Comic-Con.
A year ago today, actually.
Yeah. So I think first to start off is give us an update on the year. We obviously have 3 sets that have come out so far. A whole bunch of I guess versus sets that you want to call it. But kind of give us, I think, a state of the game.
So the game is doing really well. Fans are really taking to not only the gameplay, but also how we're expressing Transformers as a brand. One of our strengths, and we talked about this and now you've seen it, is to go back in time and pull out obscure characters or specific versions of characters, and we've really fulfilled that promise, and fans are eating it up.
The thing that stands out, so obviously you've got set in here, we got the exclusive Soundwave and Blaster set.
This one.
Really cool. I'm excited to get it. And then obviously you have the card set, mini one with the Siege, that's also available here.
These are the Omnibots.
The Omnibots, yes. The question I've got, and I asked Mark, not Mark, the other Transformers interview I did, was obviously there's a lot of synergy that goes on between, it feels like, the toys and the trading card game. They've got Siege, you've got Siege. What's the type of conversation that goes on? How much is the impact of the toys coming out versus the cards coming out? What's that kind of back and forth like?
So it's a regular back and forth. We're basically joined at the hip at the creative level. So we talk to our compatriots over at the Hasbro Transformers team on a regular basis. And our philosophy for the trading card game is twofold. We want to do a significant amount of TCG content that matches up with the generation's current toy line, like War for Cybertron Siege. And then we also want to honor our original promise of going back in time and doing throwback sets. So for example, in our first year we did Rise of the Combiners, which is a callback to both the original Combiner releases way back in Gen 1 and also the more recent trilogy. And then now we're moving into the Siege period where we've got Siege Part 1 and Part 2, 2 different releases. And that is pulling the current story into the TCG. And one of the things that we have an ability to do that's been really exciting is we print way more character cards than even Hasbro can make action figures. So we've been working with them to pull a whole bunch of characters who didn't make it into the toy line into the TCG so fans can see what their appearances in Siege are like. And the Omnibots are one of those examples. So we took those original toy designs from G1 and did a light update, so as if they were modern designed characters, but honoring the original character toy design. And now they're a special forces team inside the Siege world.
Is it anything with hey, this toy's coming out, we want to make sure there's a card for it, so people...
All the time.
Is that like a mandate, like the toy's out, you have to do a card?
It's not a mandate.
Or just something
it's a conversation.
Okay.
We talk about who, for example, we don't want to do, say, 9 of the same character in a row, right? Even most popular characters, we need to give them a rest every once in a while. So we have that conversation with the creative and the toy teams on a regular basis.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. How did, when it comes to designing the card game itself, how does the story kind of fit into it? Obviously the characters and the special play cards kind of play into it, but when it comes to actually the gameplay and design, what's kind of the thought process in that?
So we don't try and tell narrative inside the game. It's more like we show vignettes and snapshots in time. So because trading card games are inherently random in the sense that you have a deck of randomized cards, and when you open booster packs, it's random what you get. You can't experience linear narrative in the same way. So we show powerful moments. We show Megatron and Starscream fighting together, Starscream providing close air support for Megatron on the ground, and that's one snapshot of a little bit of a battle in the War for Cybertron Siege storyline. And that is our strength, is to show these isolated moments in time and then let the players recombine them how they want.
It's actually a really interesting way of putting it, because it's different than that, where Magic, I kind of think of, even in the card game itself, is still kind of telling a story in a different way. So it's just it's a different way of looking at it.
Right, it's a different philosophy.
Yeah.
And Magic is the Magic brand, right?
Yeah.
Right. Transformers TCG is part of a Transformers universe where there are other groups inside of Hasbro also telling stories.
Yeah.
So we played with the strengths of the medium, and fans have really been reacting well to that. Sometimes we do some cool things, like in the upcoming War for Cybertron Siege 2, so it's the end of the conclusion of the fight. We did this cool thing where a bunch of the art that we created tell a little bit of a story if you can connect them, but you don't need to see it. But it's not the big narrative. It's like this little isolated mission that a couple of characters go and run on.
That's really, really neat. I was actually going to ask about that. Is there any small little, I guess, like Easter eggs in a way?
Yeah. We do put them in, and it's actually one of the parts of the job I love the most is working with the creative and team and our art director. We pull in a lot of Transformers artists, Sarah, Marcelo, Dan Kahana, Ken Christensen, and watching them create parts of the Transformers universe so we can slip those little bits in is super rewarding.
So obviously the game's been out for a year. It's a growing, outside organized play. What has kind of surprised you in that year so far?
There's been a few things. One is how many parents who grew up as Transformers kids are using the Transformers TCG as a way to help raise the next generation of Transformers fans, and having that tabletop experience that's a Transformers experience, face-to-face play, sharing a love of the brand we all love with their youngsters. And that has been super surprising how many people are doing that, and it's really gratifying to watch.
Is there anything gameplay-wise that came back that you guys were really surprised about?
Yes. Right. There's so many different, like when you get the math of it is super complex, right? So as much as we can test, there are so many fans making so many decks that there are definitely some surprises. And we launched organized play recently, and there's this aspect where in between games you can take cards from what we call a sideboard, which is like your reserve, and put them into your deck. And there was a group of strategies where people put Optimus Prime in the sideboard and then played a deck with several characters, and then brought him in to go, like, basically play two big bruisers, and that was a strategy that we didn't quite anticipate. It's going really well, and that kind of emergent gameplay is what makes a trading card game stay fresh and stay new, and so there's constantly a new experience for players both to have and to discover.
For the trading card game, how far out are you designing this?
So Wizards works about 18 months out.
Yeah, because I was just talking about Magic, and they said they were already starting stuff for 2022.
Yeah, Transformers stays a little bit. Not all of our products work at that far out because we're working with the Transformers team at Hasbro. Right. So we want to remain a little bit more nimble. So as they provide new opportunities, and they're like, oh, we're doing this, so we can react. But we work pretty far out. I already have a vague idea of what 2021 looks like. Nice.
So when it comes to the two-player sets like that, I think every single one has had a great theme. They've been a lot of fun. What goes into the thoughts of designing those? Obviously the main set itself has an idea, has characters, kind of a overall theme to it. But how do you come up on this of being like, we want to do these characters in a versus set?
So Blaster and
obviously this one's obvious.
Right, but they were Soundwave in particular was the single most requested character who wasn't in the first couple of sets. Okay. We had more contact from fans and from players. It's like, when are you going to give me Soundwave in his original G1 tape deck form? So this was a no-brainer. And we got to do Blaster, right? Like, because they're natural antagonists. This one just basically wrote itself. What was interesting is which mini cassettes we picked. We picked Buzzsaw, and instead of Laserbeak. And a lot of people were like, why? I love Laserbeak. And it's because Buzzsaw came with G1 Soundwave, and we wanted to honor that original expression of the toy, right? And that is the kind of thinking that we have Laserbeak. He'll be out. He's out in War for Cybertron Siege 1. In his Siege version, we'll eventually get to a G1 version of Laserbeak. But for the other decks that you were talking about, there's really two. We break it into two parts. Is it a starter deck for new players? And there, we're looking for instant grok ability and the ability for two players to take it and have a fun and fair balance experience right out of the box. But then the other decks are for more competitive play, like Metroplex and Devastator. So there, we want to present an experience out of the box that's compelling, but also allows for customization. So a player can take those components that we're giving them to build a powerful Metroplex deck, and then customize it for a way that meets their play style.
The other thing that's standing out with each set seems to build on complexity. Obviously the first one, I don't want to call it a basic card game, but it was a pretty straightforward.
It's like the core set.
Yeah, it's core set, straightforward. And then you get to the combiners, and you have this whole new mechanic that I think caught so many people off guard of like, they're doing what now? Yep. They're bending cards? Like, what is that?
Hinging. They're hinged.
When it first came out, it was like, you're bending it? Or what's going on? Because I think everyone actually thought you had to bend the cards. So what, like, how... what are your thoughts on like doing that sort of thing? If you have a new mechanic every set, it kind of feels like it might get, or a new gimmick or whatever you want to call it every set, it might get old after a little bit.
So there's a progression when we launch a new trading card game where we know what the core mechanics are going to be. Yeah. But we can't deploy them all at once because that's just information overload. So the first several sets have been introducing things that will be regular parts of the game over time. And we're building on them. There's a very ordered, there's a very ordered progression. Like the core set has the core game rules and a little bit of weird stuff that shows you where the game could go. And then we introduced the green pip that lets you get cards back from your flip in set 2, and the triple-sided card mechanic that we're using for both combiners and triple changers. War for Cybertron Siege 1 introduces the black pip and brings Pierce into the forefront. And that was all ordered. That was intentional. At a certain point, we will have released the things that we consider to be the evergreen core mechanics of the game. And then each new set will have a new twist, but those twists may not become things that you see in every single set. They'll be dedicated to that one release.
Interesting. All right. So I guess how. I know you're going to say probably can't talk about it. Are there more mechanics that haven't been seen yet as part of this?
There's one or two that we're going to be putting out over the next 2 sets. So once we get through the 5th booster set, we consider the core game mechanics and all of the things that you'll see on a regular rotating basis will have been introduced. And then we get to play with remixing them and then adding new mechanics in on a limited basis, like that just appear in 1 or 2 sets, that play in a new way with the core and evergreen mechanics.
Interesting. So Siege is an interesting set in that it's a 2-part set, which is the first 2-part set. Like you've had core and combiners, now you've got these 2 Siege. Is that something we're going to see? Like I know with Magic they've got blocks and all that. Is that something that's going to be more introduced in this series?
Yes. So the War for Cybertron series of Transformers events, and I'll remain vague on that, has an enormous amount of content. And then there's the enormous amount of content that we want to bring into the TCG. For example, we redid the Firecons for Siege 1 and do the redesign of those characters as if they were modern toys. You're going to continue seeing us doing that for the major War for Cybertron events. And that's so much content, we can't contain it in one set. So we're going to be breaking some of our releases into 2 twin booster sets, and then we'll also be continuing to do throwback sets that pull older themes from the Transformers toy line from year 1 all the way up to today, and release those as standalones.
So interesting on the Siege with the kind of the 2-part. When you design it, do you design it all together and then split it up? Like, how does the actual that design work?
So, sort of. We map out what we want to do in the entirety of Siege, and then it goes back to what I was talking about, how we release those core mechanics. We're still in that phase, so that thinking layered into it, and then at a certain point we bifurcated, and we had a body of mechanics and themes that were going to be in the first set, and a body that were going to be in the second set. And then after we knew where the boxes were put, like we put the stuff on the shelf, and then we went and did a deep dive into Siege 1, and then a deep dive into Siege 2, and then we polished the whole thing.
That's really, really cool. We're going to wrap it up, we've had more than enough of your time. Is there any characters that you're super excited that you've already done, or you maybe get to do or want to do as far as cards? Because I mean, the beauty of it is it's a card, it's not a toy. Like a toy is years of design. Like a card it's a mechanic. Obviously there's a lot of work that goes into it, but at the same time you could do a lot more. You could do the deep dive.
Someday I want to do this guy.
Yeah, I was about to ask. Like,
I don't have any concrete plans for him right now, But you know, Metroplex is like yay big, right?
yeah.
Right? Like, so if Metroplex is this big, we have to figure out how we can do a Unicron and keep it true to how we represent characters in the game.
That would be, I mean, I could already think of some interesting mechanics of that, but yeah, that was actually going to be my final question of like, since you guys do synergy really well, do we see a Unicron?
One day, I hope that we get Unicron and maybe Primus into the game.
I always appreciate you talking. So
It's been a pleasure.
thanks so much. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Now, what you can do that would be really helpful is subscribe or visit our website. We've got links right here that makes this super easy. By subscribing, you will make sure to get further videos down the road. And of course, visiting the website, you get all the greatest news. But just watching, we really, really appreciate it. Until next time, keep rolling those dice and keep it geeky.